this is really scary, I think, for Europe. If you get an America that decides we need to have Open RAN's failed, yeah? Open RAN's failed in terms of let's try to bring through a Mavenir or a parallel wireless or whatever. We have no equipment making ability ourselves. What's the solution? Let's buy an Ericsson, let's buy a Nokia. And then Europe loses two of the tech champions it's got. Europe's going to go, I'm going to do this again, Scott, you have to explain
now that. Ian's pointing downwards, everyone.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. I think we've just about recovered from Mobile World Congress, which is where we brought you the last one from. I didn't
feel that bad, to be honest.
Oh, well, I'm amazed because you had an earlier flight. For some reason, on the last night, we knocked it on the head about 4 a.m.
Yeah.
In fact, I got to give some shout-outs there as well.
Did I leave at the same time as you?
Yeah, we all left together.
I can't remember that.
And I thought, and I'd sort of baked in a bit of a lie-in the next day, but my body didn't get the memo, and I woke up really early, so I was shattered the next day. I wasn't hungover, because I think we were a bit more sensible than we've been in previous years, notwithstanding your inability to remember how you got home.
That's quite normal.
But I paced myself a bit better.
That's normal, even after not having beers.
Well, there we go. That's just senility. In fact, before I go on, you can hear a chuckle in the background. Who's someone who was a surprise uninvited guest on the pod that we did from the show, John Strand, analyst John Strand, the legend that is John Strand. Great to have you here. And the one we did, he was in the background when we were recording one from there, and then one bit where we were having one of our chaotic transitions, he just sort of came over and started banging on. And there's a bit, you haven't heard it yet, John, where Ian's going, John, no one can hear you, mate.
I was all right.
Yeah. No, you were right. You could hear a vague sort of Danish murmur in the background, but nothing.
It looks like you had a break. Okay.
It was more of a transition than a break.
Yeah.
But it was fine. I think it added to when I was promoting it, I just said it's our most chaotic one because we had about 2 transitions. We fit it all into a bit of time. It was in the field.
Yeah.
But fair play to Pierre and his crew. They managed it really well.
That's cool.
So that was all good. In fact, that's one thing I want to say. So I was knackered and I slept for about 12 hours when I got back, but I was still knackered the next day. It was one of those weird sleeps that was so deep that I felt like I'd been in a fight when I woke up, and I only really started to feel human on the Saturday. But I still managed to write a piece on that Friday, which we might go into.
Yeah, I did. I think I wrote 2.
Go on. Yeah, well, I remember one year. Do you remember you wrote up that piece about Huawei's lanyard dongles?
Huawei spying on people.
Where they got trackers in.
I did.
Which caused a big fuss.
It's got loads of hits, apparently.
We got loads of hits.
More traffic than anything else.
And I know from chatting to people at Huawei that it certainly got their fucking attention.
Yeah, I don't think they were very happy about that.
They weren't too chuffed about that. But I remember you wrote that on, pretty much at the airport when we were waiting for the train or something, didn't you?
Well, I didn't know about it until then.
You're a goddamn machine.
Everybody was talking about it. It was like,
I'm just sitting there staring into the middle distance like I've just come back from Nam, and you're whacking out your biggest story of the year. So fair play to you.
The fun part was that the GSMA said we'll look into it and they will tell what's going on, and no information had been put into the public space since that.
No, it was all eventually brushed under the carpet.
Yeah.
Well, a certain senior executive at a certain other equipment vendor was taking it apart and putting up tweets.
Yes, I remember
think they got removed by his employer.
Oh right, that's why you're being. I know who it is too.
But you could still, someone had clipped the actual tweet and some resent it around, so you could still sort of see it.
Someone needs to tell that person about screenshots. But anyway, but it was all good fun, and a special shout out on the night to CC Group, or they're just CCG now. Apparently, it stands for something else, sort of vaguely marketing-y. Sorry, guys.
CCG.
Yeah, didn't you remember when we went for their January drinks? They had a little sign, and I can't remember what it stands for. They're going to be muttering under their breath when they listen to this. But they've decided to rebrand. They still got CCG, but it's not Customer Care Group, which is the origins of their name. It now means something new and
it
exciting.
doesn't matter, does it? Because no one ever called them Customer Care Group.
No, they were just CC Group. Yeah. So now they're CCG. Anyway, them and Babel, who haven't rebranded, because they sorted out the afters on the Wednesday, where you were as well, John.
Yes.
And last year it was a bit chaotic because for some reason the bar we go to, which is called Glacier, if I say it now, we'll have loads of people turning up. They for some reason they got freaked out that loads of people turned up wanting to get pissed.
They had a guy running it. He was basically like a Catalan Basil Fawlty.
Yeah, he was just having a stress out. And just going, can you just sit down and be quiet, please? In Spanish. Siéntate ahora. And
Mr. Fawlty, can you get out?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, roles reversed. Roles reversed. They just needed some Manuel equivalent who was actually from Grimsby. And anyway, and so that was a bit of a shame last year.
In my bar, get out!
Well, that was what it was like, and we muddled through last year. But this year, I've got to give them all loads of gratitude. They put money behind the bar. They got it. They rented out the whole thing. They even had like finger food and bottles of wine and all that sort of thing. So
it was good. It was
so
really good.
I was very grateful for that, and a special shout out to Katie from CCG,
Yeah.
who did a lot of the preparation and all that sort
It
of
was
thing.
really good, and they finished quite late as well, didn't they? When they did eventually kick us.
Yeah,
out.
they
It
kicked
was
out
quite-
about 1.
Yeah, that's-
and then I've got my annual thing that I do because I can speak a little bit of Spanish.
You knock on someone's door.
Yeah. It's just a next door upstairs cocktail bar that's got a bit of a speakeasy feel about it because there's a geezer called Kike on the front.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there, and and you got to negotiate with him before he'll let you in. It's classic sort of nightclub kind of vibe.
Yeah.
It's quite cool place.
He stopped short of
It was
going no
cool.
trainers. But you can't just turn up with 30 or 40 people, however many we were, at 1 a.m, and just bowl in there. So I had to go in there and have a little word with him. He actually remembered me from last year.
Did he?
Yeah.
How did you manage to get us all in there? Because there were.
I just
about
had, well,
30 or
I was just
40
honest. I
people.
just explained, somos 30 or 40.
Well, you did a very good job, Scott. I'm
30
impressed.
ingleses.
And listen, they were very polite up there, and the service was really good. But on the other side, you came with a lot of people who was heavy drinkers.
Yeah. Well, exactly.
So,
I mean,
business.
they'd be stupid to turn it away.
Yeah.
And
Yes, but we've seen what happened.
And I was amazed at 4 a.m. In fact, this leads me into one email, which I'm going to read out anonymised, but the person will know who they are. When we left at 4 a.m., there were still loads of people out.
I know. I noticed that.
I was so proud of us.
Someone told me that they were out till about 6.
Yeah, well, it might be this person, so keep it quiet because I'm going to anonymise it. But one person I know, I said, "Have you recovered from OWAR Congress?" He goes, "Fully recovered, but minus 1 pair of glasses." Went to bed at 5:45 on Thursday morning with an alarm set for 7:15, except the alarm didn't go off. Woke up by the cleaners at. Here we are, Ian. You're looking to see who it is.
Oh, yes.
Woke up by the cleaners at 9:30, and into the theatre for 11 without my glasses and with a suitcase wheel shaped hole in my coat, successful all round. And I just went, "Oh my God, that's epic!" And asked him for any more details, and said, "Surely in hindsight that was a power through situation." You were considering powering through, weren't
I
you?
was, yeah.
But I advised against it. But in this
You
case,
were quite sensible.
He followed up and goes, got to the apartment with every intention of pulling an all-nighter, and then thought, nah, a quick power nap will do me good. Big mistake. No idea on the specs. Confident I had them when I got home, but the cleaners couldn't find them the next day, so maybe they're wandering the streets somehow. So you know who you are. Legendary effort. And that's a sort of Wednesday night at my World Congress anecdote that we have. And then one other little shout-out before I skip the opening bollocks, unless you've got anything, Ian.
Right.
I did a few shout outs on the MWC pod, and I'll say now, it's so gratifying whenever I bump into someone and they say they listen to the pod. It really makes my day, and it's just great to hear that we're sat here in the studio just talking shit, and then somewhere halfway across the world someone's listening to it, and it actually maybe teaches them something, maybe entertains them. That's obviously considered worth listening to.
Makes them run faster.
Yeah, it makes them run faster, makes them less of a fat bastard.
Or when they get angry at something that's been said.
Yeah.
You get a bit of surge of adrenaline that makes you.
They're like, well, they get to the fucking point. And one guy I gave a shout out on the last pod. He goes, he heard the shout out and said thanks a lot. And then he said thanks so much for the shout out. This is him getting in touch on LinkedIn. The telco guys in my region, brackets Saudi and the wider Middle East and Africa region, often get together to draw upon the analysis and insights you and Ian share. Long may it continue, and we'd love to host you guys in Riyadh or Dubai if Riyadh or Dubai come calling. So that sort of thing just warms my heart. It's just so cool. And to anyone who's listening, if you feel like blowing smoke up our arse and telling us how great we are, don't be shy.
I've never really
you can
been
find
to
me on
the Gulf.
LinkedIn. No, I've never been to the Middle East at all.
I've been to Bahrain.
Israel's
the
only bit of the Middle East I've been to.
I wasn't building a skyscraper. I was sitting in an office, but I was there for about 6 weeks.
You know, it's actually a Dane who discovered Bahrain.
Of course it was.
Of course it was.
I knew that was coming. I
knew it.
on his way to America.
Was he the guy who went around on a camel sort of drawing out lines?
It was
sort of
all sand. It was riding on their camels and all that.
Yeah.
And he discovered the history of Bahrain and dig it out.
Yeah.
Well, it is known that people from your part of the world, John, were fairly prolific travellers.
We were.
Yeah.
Vikings a good example.
Wasn't it a Dane who designed the Sydney Opera House?
It was.
Yes.
Oh, don't get him started. Now he's going to go off on the whole pod's going to be him going,
Can't remember his
Denmark's better than everywhere else
We
in the
like
world.
things which looks good. We like things which looks good. We're very good at design, you know, beautiful women and so on. That's the reason why I have an American wife. But anyhow.
No, believe me, in terms of every aspect of the aesthetics of Copenhagen, I've got no complaints.
Yeah. That's
So moving on. So I think that's covered all that. But yes, you know, get in touch. It's great to hear from you, especially as we don't have comments on our publications right now on our websites. It's really great to hear from people, and you don't have to say nice things. You can say it's shit if you want.
It's got AI on it instead.
Yeah, but it's always great to hear. So, so we got you in, John, specifically to primarily recap Mobile World Congress. Yes. Obviously, we did an on-site immediate recap, and now the dust settled. We're a week or so later.
Yeah.
And there's loads to talk about. So that's what we're going to do. And so it'll probably be even less structured than ever. I've got a few ideas of which directions it can go in. And we might also recap some of the writing Ian did from there, because as I think I've explained before, I hardly do any writing from Mobile World Congress because I'm doing all the commercial videos. And then maybe we'll have time for one news item at the end. So I think I might just get straight into it, John. When I wrote my recap on the Friday, like I said, when I was still knackered, and I linked to your preview where you anticipated there would be the usual sort of special pleading from European operators and all that. Why don't I just throw it to you and just give us your top line sort of recollections of Mobile World Congress, your analysis, and we'll take it from there. Actually, sorry, before you do that, I've got to interrupt with one more thing. John brought loads of beers. And one, because he knew we might be talking about politics, he brought a Mr. President.
That's good. I like
Defiant double IPA. Yeah. The only problem is it's 9.2%.
That's the sort of thing we give to Howard, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not going anywhere fucking near that. Anyway, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Over to you, mate.
So the short version is just read my preview of Mobile World Congress, then you have a very good recap of what's happened.
So you called it well.
Called it well.
Okay, well, that was lovely.
That's
make sure you
fine.
join us for the next one.
Next. No, but reality is, I think it was in many ways exciting. You could say I've been in this industry for more than 28 years. I have, I've been to Mobile World Congress, I think, more than 25 times or whatever it is.
Wow.
And I've done my pre and post Mobile World Congress notes for 20-something years. And in the past, it was an event for the telecom industry, with the telecom industry in the center. Now have turned into an event for all those who create services on top of the telecom industry.
Yeah. We used to call them OTTs. We've stopped even bother saying that, haven't we?
Yeah, but then it basically says like the telecom operators, instead of being the center of the exhibition, and now the telecom operators like the carpets. And then all the show, what's going on. It's all those who do the service.
All the public cloud, all the AI, all that.
All those things.
Hyperscalers.
Yes. So it used to be, at Edison's time, an event about electricity. Now it's about all the things who use electricity.
Right. Fair enough.
Yeah, I agree to some extent, but I thought there was a bit less of the... If you go back to like 10 years ago, talk about companies like Facebook and WhatsApp, I thought was much stronger. I think there was a huge focus this time on AI.
Yeah.
Which is obviously not... It's obviously not come from telecom, and the kind of AI tools that are being talked about could be applicable to banking or retail or any other sector, but it's still stuff that they're using in the operation side. It's not something that they're providing to a consumer. You're talking about things like chatbots, or the way that you use AI to improve network operations. So I thought it was quite an industry-focused event this time round. As opposed to, I think in the past, it's been very clear, like there's been conversations. I remember one year that I was there, it must be 12 years ago now, where the WhatsApp CEO was up on stage at the time. This is like just literally just before the sort of Facebook, or just after the Facebook takeover, and the whole sort of concept of OTT services over the top of. I just think that's table stakes now. Everybody knows that. I think.
Yes, and that's basically that's old news. But I must say that I think it's also important to say that it's just the new OTT guys we're talking about. The new services. It's like we don't need to talk about Instagram. We don't need to talk about Facebook or WhatsApp and all that. That's history. So now they just talk about AI. So that's just another vertical on top of the networks.
Yeah,
and I think that's important to say. Yes, some of these verticals, some AI solutions, can the operators get the benefits of? But the question is something where you'll be able to measure in more revenue, lower cost, higher profitability.
Yeah.
And there I have my doubts, to be honest.
Yeah, I do. Well, I do as well. I mean, I have my doubts about it raising revenues, and that's the kind of silver bullet.
Yeah.
I don't really see why AI applies.
And I could repeat myself from our previous podcast we've done together, but basically, if I look at it from a shareholder's perspective, I would say Mobile World Congress, I would be disappointed because
I would.
I could
You
say...
mean a shareholder of an operator?
Shareholders and operators, definitely.
Yeah.
If I'm doing some of those who do services, see tons of opportunities. The art is to pick the right winners, if you could say like that.
Yeah.
But when it comes from an operator's perspective, we are still at a point where it's probably better to put your savings in a jam jar than put them into telecom shares.
Your missus just
they're not.
call, by the way.
They're not growth stocks for sure. I mean, they've gone through that phase. That's over for them. Everybody's got a phone. Everybody's got a broadband connection, so they're not growth stocks anymore. But I could see AI having the potential to lower costs for telcos.
Yeah, but the question is how much.
Well, I think potentially could lower it by a lot. I mean, these are fairly game-changing days, I think, in terms of what we're seeing. Last year, too, has been quite scary.
So you're talking about across the board. Obviously, there's...
I'm not saying this is specific to telco.
No, but there's obviously...
Call centers, of course.
Yeah, they're going to get better and better.
Yeah.
I mean, autonomous networks is a big topic now.
Yeah.
You can pretty much do that. It's more of a cultural thing, the reason that people don't want to do it. But you could run networks with... You don't need half the amount of people there to do it. So... If you can cut, staff's a big cost. It's 25% of the operating cost of an average European telco. But if you can cut that down to 5%.
Yeah, but the main part of those costs, the sales and marketing cost.
Yeah.
So all these things we're talking about here is people, operators spend 12% of their sale on CapEx, yeah? But sales and marketing costs is 25 to 30%.
Yeah.
And if you look at that's the biggest cost.
Yeah.
And people are not always talking about, we want to have lower capex, we want cheaper equipment, we want blah blah blah, and doing all those things. But it's a little bit like the sales and marketing people have been saved. They're allowed to do what they're gonna do. Okay, so they just switch. The market is not growing; they're just switching customers, and basically they're not lowering the acquisition cost. And we can see that there's a number of MVNOs over the years which have been able to lower acquisition costs because the MVNOs have been driving the SIM-only sale, and the MVNOs have been driving the online sale, online top-up sale. That have been driven by MVNOs, not by the operators, which basically have copied what the MVNOs did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned the marketing thing. I'm always struck, and granted I'm going to be acutely attuned to it because of my day job, I'm always struck by how much operators spend on marketing when you consider how little revenue growth they got. I mean, you're always seeing ads for various operators in the UK on various channels. So it is a big one.
It is, and
they're basically like an FMCG.
I suppose that's their only opportunity to grow is by taking market share from somebody else. So you put
or vice versa.
You put your money into sales and marketing,
or vice versa. It's a marketing arms race, and if they don't do it, then they lose share, sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's basically the problem with the mobile operators. They lose between 25 and 30% of their customers every year.
They churn.
Wow. And did
you know that?
I didn't know it was that high.
If you have a churn in that range, of course, there's a lot of price-sensitive customers, and there's also those who want a phone with the subsidies, and when they're going to buy the next phone.
Is that in specific markets? Because if you look at the sort of UK telcos, the four networks, their market shares are always pretty stable. They never really change.
But that's
very much,
basically because they're changing customers.
Yeah,
okay.
So it's the churn.
So the churn is
and
like
churn's
if you
expensive, isn't
if
it?
you look at the financial industry, you don't have the same churn.
Yeah.
Because it can be difficult.
I've been with the same bank since I was a teenager.
Yeah.
Same as
well, you got to change all your you've got to tell your company that it's got to pay your salary into a different account. You've got to get your mortgage sorted out for a different account or
and
whatever.
It's everything. And it's and I must say it's if I look at the churn this in the telecommunication industry have always been a huge challenge, always been the key challenge.
Yeah.
And particularly from that point where the growth stopped because we had 100% penetration. Yeah.
Yeah. But also, I think it's good that people can churn more easily.
It is. Listen, and now you have eSIM and you can do it OTT.
Well, this is a big topic that we probably none of us have talked about on the pod. That was when we were talking about themes before we came on. Is satellite,
right?
And satellite. I think people like Starlink doing deals with AT&T for eSIMs and this kind of thing. You know, and I mean, there's been a couple of deals.
We did touch on it in the Mobile World Congress pod.
Did we?
Yeah, do you remember? Because I said it was shite.
Well, I'm just curious. I mean, I'm always interested in the whole satellite as a. Why is Elon Musk? Why is Jeff Bezos? Why are they so interested in satellite
and investing so much money?
I mean, I guess globally, if you're thinking you can pick up 3 or 4%, that's quite a lot of business. But it's hugely expensive to put these things up. You know, it's not as good as terrestrial.
Nowhere near.
You're kind of thinking, what's the long-term plan? Are they thinking that these satellite systems in the future would be good enough to overtake terrestrial? And then you've got the potential to have a global operator, which is pretty much what people like Musk and Bezos want to do.
Now we go down the satellite lane.
Yeah.
But let's say it very simple. I think it's a market where the winner takes it all. This will be main part of the market will be dominated by one player.
Yeah.
And I think we already
This is the satellite market.
Yes. And I think we already have the name of that one player. Okay. The reality is, if you look at the history of putting things to space, you work in the space industry with something called payload per kilo. What does it cost to send a kilo into the space?
Yeah.
And the reality is that at the space shuttle, it cost about $52,000, $55,000 per kilo to send into space. At the Ariane rockets, at that time was like $10,000 to $12,000, $13,000 per kilo. Today, we talk about with the SpaceX technology, where they have where they can reuse the rockets. We talk about.
You see them coming back down again, don't you?
It's amazing to see.
It is quite clever. Yeah.
We talk about the cost is between $1,500 and $2,500 per kilo. At the same time, you can say, so Elon Musk is in that situation that he basically had the lowest. His cost of lifting a kilo is the lowest of anyone in the industry. So no one can put a kilo into the space in the same price as he can do it. Same thing he have done, which is to a certain extent a little bit scary. He put up global networks of satellites, 6,700 satellites, without having any permission to run the business. He didn't have any spectrum or anything. Okay,
he just whacked them up there.
Just put.
Well, there must be some regulation of.
There is
of
regulation.
space.
No, listen. There is regulation on spectrum the same way as this.
No, but also regulation of like orbits and the actual space, the environment.
Exactly.
Where you can lob the stuff up.
Totally, and he's.
There's loads of shit up there, Scott.
So there is.
We
might talk about that.
We have a separate podcast about that, but it's very interesting to say that you need to have access to the spectrum. And he put up the satellites without having access to spectrum.
Betting that you get.
Basically saying, if I put it up and it's working, I hope I will get the permission to do it.
Yeah.
And we can see one country after the other one do it. You need access to spectrum the same way as you do it for mobile operator, where you can say mobile operator use the spectrum horizontal, satellite companies use it vertical, if you could say it like that. So he did that. He built it and say, hey, I'm here. When you build satellites in the quantity you've been doing, 6,700 satellites, you build them in such a big quantity that he probably have built more satellites and put more satellites into space than the whole satellite industry have done from a historical perspective.
Yeah.
So basically,
granted, they're smaller satellites at a lower orbit.
Low orbit, 550 to 600 kilometers.
LEO.
They have an average lifespan of 5 to 6 years, then they fall down. But what's interesting to see is that
who catches them when they fall down?
Atmosphere, and they burn up in the atmosphere.
You on your head.
Yeah. Do you know, that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah.
I'm taller than you. I'll be the one who cops it first.
I know. Won't be good, but you still have hair on the top of your head.
Yeah,
no, so what's interesting in here is, so basically, if you look at the normally in the satellite industry, the lifespan of a satellite was like 10, 15 years, and the innovation cycle was 10 years. It was very slow. It was a very old-fashioned industry. He comes in, he have an innovation cycle was maybe 3.5 years. So he evolved his satellite much faster than any of his competitors. At the same time, he produced them at assembly band, so he produced them much cheaper in big quantities. And at the same time, the active equipment which you're going to use to connect to it, he have a huge factory in Texas where he produces this in big quantities, so he can produce it cheaper. So basically, as you probably remember, the first phones cost, let's say, 4,000 euros for a phone. And then the quantity went up and the price went down, and then suddenly you can get a phone for 10 euros or 20 euros for the simple phones, and a smartphone for 100 euros. The reality is he's doing exactly the same, but instead of done it in 25 years, as we've seen in the telecommunication industry, he's done it in less than 5 years.
Yeah.
So, and it is really amazing to see the innovation there. I would just say to be his competitor is not fun, because they don't have access. The lifting power, where do they buy it? They have to call Elon and say, "Hey, Elon, I need to put up some satellites."
Yeah, no, I agree. I think he's clearly shown that
he's cost leader. He's
innovated satellite to a degree. But what I'm wondering is whether his position in satellite in the future will enable him to maybe take some market share from the terrestrial side of things.
Yeah, can I just quickly say on top of that, and which we might get back onto later on, he was well positioned in terms of getting access to the legislators and regulators before. Now he's even better positioned.
Oh, yeah.
I would disagree there, but let me say, when he got his big breakthrough in the U.S. was during the hurricane in Florida, where basically a lot of the telecommunication infrastructure was wiped out.
Yeah.
And he said to FCC, "I have some satellites there. I need some permission to use it, and we can provide with connectivity today." That was one of his breakthrough. I was speaking in a conference about spectrum in Colombia in November, and there was regulators from all over Latin America. And lots of these countries, they love Starlink because they can deliver connectivity where no one else can do it.
Well, he's just done massive deals in India this week as well.
It's a huge deal.
Yeah.
And basically he offered it. We just published a report which is actually free on our website about these LEO satellites, and where we're basically looking into it to the is it an alternative to mobile towers, if you could say it in a very simple way.
Yeah.
And our conclusion is not. It's a supplement, if you could say it like that. And there's also something like satellite will not be able to provide you with indoor coverage. You still have to have line of sight. So I think it's very.
Can I just ask for clarification on that? Because when we're talking about satellite, we're talking about two distinct paradigms. We're talking satellite to base station, and satellite direct to device.
Yes.
And satellite direct to device is the one that I call shite, because it's still only about SMS levels of data.
No,
rate,
that's what he's doing. No, they're different things. You can get satellite straight to your mobile phone,
but it's a crappy data rate.
He's not doing that. Starlink's doing it to a dish.
That was the first. That's what I just said. That's the first chunk of it. But I think it's important to distinguish that.
That's a different kind of service. Someone like Neil McRae would experiment with that, so you can watch Netflix and see what it's like.
Indeed.
So for a high broadband service.
But when we're talking about satellite competing with legacy forms, I think it's important to distinguish between those two paradigms. That's all.
No, but I think it's interesting to see what's happening here. We have the World Radio Conference coming up in 2 years.
No, another one.
Another one, yeah. But the question is, will it be China? Will be China or it will be Rwanda? The problem is it's so complicated. It takes so long time. So companies like Starlink or SpaceX, they're actually complaining because the time it takes before World Radio Conference make any decisions and doing all those things going so slow compared to the innovation of this industry. So the satellite industry right now is actually experiencing that they're speeding up, but the regulatory system cannot follow the speed they're in.
Yeah, I think that's been. I think you're right, John, but I think that's largely been true of tech on the whole. I mean, the regulatory, the whole pace of life in regulatory, and I'd say more broadly in the public sector, is so much slower than it is, especially in the the sort of cliched Silicon Valley startup in a garage sort of move fast and break things kind of vibe that are never going to catch up. And I think your point's well made. In fact, we can veer onto this now, or we can put a pin in it. But there was some stuff on the eve of Mobile World Congress where which seemed to have been at least part prompted by some of the really remarkable stuff coming out of the US recently, where the EU sort of went, right, okay, yeah, I think we need to raise our game. We will not get in the way quite so much as we used to before. And that sort of overlaps slightly with what you were saying. If we want to be competitive, especially if there's this increasing geopolitical tension, which there obviously is between the US sphere of influence and the Chinese sphere of influence, where EU fits into that is a bit of a, it's more US side, but it's not quite as clear cut as that. And we're taking 2 years to make a decision on something that could be done in 2 minutes. And obviously, we're going to fall behind.
Maybe it's not about sides at all these days.
I don't think it should be, but I think that's the way it's going. I'm not happy about it.
No, but what I'm saying is, well, I think more so. I didn't really want to go down this route, to be honest with you, but more so the EU sort of thinking it needs to try and do its own thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, and that's a point.
But then we can go into, we will come back to AI.
Okay,
we have all the AI regulation in Europe, and I have these. Did you try them down there? I have them actually at home. The Ray-Ban Meta glasses. Do you know them?
Yeah, I think didn't Paolo speak about them on the pod?
It's really cool. So you have a pair of sunglasses that have built-in cameras. You can say, take a picture, take a video. You can ask it questions. Where am I? You're in a studio.
I'm waiting for a contact lens.
Or you can just think.
It's really amazing. The loudspeakers, and you say, send this message on WhatsApp, and dictate the message and it's sent. Send it to that person. Post this on Facebook or Instagram. It's really cool concept. Yeah. And when I'm in the US and use them, it's cool. So where am I? Oh, you're sitting on a sports bar getting a beer. Fine. Court.
What's the point of that?
The reality is, when I come to Europe,
why is it good that your glasses know you're in a sports?
No, but you can ask them about a lot. It have these,
especially when it's meta,
and they have this live AI agent in it. So basically, can do what I call they surveillance big time.
That agent can fuck off.
But basically, the reality is, what's interesting here is when you come to Europe, a lot of the functions don't work.
Yeah.
Because of EU regulation.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's like buying a Ferrari and you're only allowed to drive in the first gear, maybe the second gear. Okay. Yeah. If you're lucky. Okay. And that's not fun if you like to drive fast and you want to go on a racing track. So if I look at I saw actually Politico had an event coming up here a very short time about AI and Europe and so on, and a lot of people speaking and so on. There's no European AI companies on an AI event.
Well, they tend to get bought by.
It's like
no, but even what was that Mistral?
Mistral?
Are they there? Yeah. They're not even at the event.
No, not Google. Most of Google's AI expertise comes from Europe.
DeepMind.
They just get bought by the US. That's the problem.
When they bought Deep.
It's not that we don't have the ability to do the AI stuff. It's that they get acquired. So, but I'm not necessarily averse to. You can say for sure I go along with the line that EU over-regulates and there's a lot of red tape. I don't think anybody wouldn't go along with that line.
No, but listen, we a lot of people which have said they have over-regulated for years, and they have denied it. Now they came out
and admitted it.
And said we're going to remove red tape. Okay.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is I don't think lurching from we've over-regulated for years to this. I mean, you see this going on in the UK at the moment where. Back in the days of Rishi Sunak, they were trying to sort of position themselves as caretakers of AI and let's take a cautious approach to it. And there's a lot of ethical questions that need to be asked about AI, actually.
Definitely.
Which I personally think have really been swept under the carpet, all of those questions in the last year. And all of it, and one example of that is Keir Starmer coming forwards and going, we're going to be an AI country, let's do AI. And don't worry about that, it'll be all right. What could possibly go wrong?
No, but listen.
So I think it's all very well to sort of mock regulation, but AI is an area, personally, if there's an area that you want to regulate, it's AI.
I went to one of the keynotes there. The CEO of...
This is at Mobile World Congress.
At Lenovo. He said Lenovo will launch this AI agent on your computer which will be an AI twin, which follow you, what you do and work and so on, and can help you assist in your work.
And I want the EU to regulate that.
And basically, I said to I was sitting next to one of my friends and said,
and what countries are Novo from, John?
China. And who are they owned from? Who they're partly owned by the Chinese government.
Right.
Anyhow, I was sitting to him, would you like to have an Chinese AI twin, which basically take all your data to China, or it's like DeepSeek wrote in the conditions for DeepSeek that said we store all your data on a secure server in mainland China.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the good thing is, by using these things, you don't need to apply for visa if you go to China. They have all the information.
They already know who you are. They've already got a reason to throw you in a cell and throw away the key.
Yeah.
So yeah, to bringing all that back to Mobile World Congress and the sort of, I suppose let's finish talking about the European side of it before we go off on other tangents. So there was that regulation thing. I think, anyone who listens to this pod regularly know that I'm fairly hostile to the EU, not because I'm hostile to Europe. I hasten to add, half my family live in Spain. I've got Danish mates and everything.
Thank you.
It's the bureaucracy. It's the actual institution of the EU as opposed to the continent of Europe that I criticise. And one of my biggest criticisms, apart from it being unaccountable, Ursula von der Leyen wasn't voted in by anyone, is this incredibly stodgy, slow, complacent, bureaucratic bollocks. And the really interesting thing, and when I wrote my piece reflecting on Mobile World Congress, which, I led with the fact that it seems like ages ago now, but just before, like the Friday before everyone flew out, there'd been that remarkable thing where the Ukrainian president had gone to the White House and had a public fucking argument in front of TV cameras with the president and the vice president, which kind of freaked everyone out, didn't it? Because it's unsettling. It's abnormal. And when things like that can happen, it sort of throws so much up in the air, you just wonder what's going to happen next. Thankfully, nothing so far catastrophic has come from it. But anyway, the reason I say that is one of the most interesting things that's happened from all the craziness, no, crazy is a bit too pejorative, all the very unorthodox, unpredictable stuff coming out of the Trump Mark II White House, is that Europe has just gone, oh shit, we can't rely on the Yanks to deal with everything anymore. We can't rely on them to deal with the defense of our eastern border with Russia. We can't rely on them to underwrite our armed forces. We can't rely on them, and hopefully we'll come to this in a sec with respect to trade. We can't rely on them for benign trade environment and all that sort of thing. And so now they're talking a sort of good game about raising their game and spending more on defence and being more autonomous and all that sort of thing. So I guess that's what I want to ask you, John, and I'll see you in, but I'm going to ask John first. What do you think of all that, the fire that's been lit under Europe, and do you think it's going to respond constructively to all that?
Listen, Trump is a gift to Europe, okay?
Right, go on.
He's a gift. Europe have not been pulling their act together for years. They promised Obama they would spend 2% of their GDP on defense. They didn't do it. They spent it on welfare service, the green transition. They spend it on all kind of things except defense. My little country, Denmark, promised Trump during his first administration in 2019 that we will spend 2 billion euros on Arctic defense. At that time, we had 5 dog slates in the north, 2 going east-west, 2 going west-east, 2 cannon boats with defect cannons, and a landing strip in the south part of Greenland, which is so short that the new F-35 planes we have cannot land there. Okay, there's a hangar and 6 soldiers.
Greenland's not going to be your problem soon anyway.
No, but listen, it's not true. It's not true. So the reality is we didn't keep our promises. That's what it is.
Yeah, and that applies across all of Europe.
And that's whole Europe. It's quite interesting to see that Europe have said a lot. And let's be honest, there's 2 ways to end a war. The one way is to use a lot of weapons. Mm-hmm. The other way is to go to a negotiating table and discuss how you can end the war. That's the 2 ways to end the war. Let's look at the facts. Over the last 3 years, Europe have done nothing to stop the war. There have not been any attempts since in 2022, when Macron in a month had 11 meetings with Putin. And you probably remember the picture with Macron in the one end of the long table and Putin in the other end.
That was a bit weird.
Yeah. So that's the only attempt to end the war. Then we can say, what have Europe done to help the Ukrainians to fight the war? And we're publishing a study actually on on Monday or Tuesday.
Which may be the day this comes out.
Exactly, when this comes out. And basically, in that study, we've been compared which countries are using Chinese equipment, which countries are not implementing the 5G toolbox, and how much military aid have they been giving to Ukraine.
So to understand the purpose of that study, bearing in mind that you're a telecoms analyst and this is a telecoms podcast, you're looking at the European relationship between the two main spheres of influence. Is that correct?
Yeah. And you could say also in that way, I'm trying to look at who talks and who acts. Let me take it very simple.
Yeah.
Listen, it's easy for me to be very critical to a number of European countries here, okay?
Yeah.
Very easy, because I'm Danish. That's a coincidence.
You were just critical of Denmark, for which I applaud you.
I'm very critical in many ways. Of course, I have to be that. But the reality is, over the last 3 years, Denmark have spent 25% more in euros in direct military aid to Ukraine than France, Spain, and Italy combined. Okay? And if it's guns, weapons, bullets, makes a difference in a war, and you don't pay to the war, then you're just talking. Okay? We have countries which haven't spent, of course, Hungary, we know that they are very pro-Russian and so on. They haven't spent anything, okay?
But why does this interest you professionally?
This interests me because there's a lot of, we can come back to Zelensky's crazy meeting in the White House. But the reality is, we can see that over the last 3 years, Europe has spent much more on Russian energy than we have spent on support to Ukraine.
Until the Americans blew up that pipeline.
Yeah, but
Allegedly.
whatever. But the reality is, last year, France spent more money. I'm sorry, Pierre. More money on Russian energy than they spent the last 3 years on military to Ukraine. Okay?
Oh, how could you, Pierre?
Pierre, how could you do
I thought it was all nuclear.
Yeah, I thought
Just gas, I guess. Yeah.
No, the French consumption of Russian LNG gas went up with 30% last year. So the reality is we have to take
No,
this
that's
discussion.
electricity.
No, and listen, I had a presentation in the U.S. Senate in December, and I met a senator, and he said to me, "Can you please tell me how I'm going to explain to my voters that they're going to spend money on helping Ukraine, defending European borders, if the Europeans don't want to pay for defending their own borders and don't want to pay to help Ukraine?" Okay?
Yeah.
And that's a reality. We can also see in our study that those countries which are closest to Russia, giving most actually in military aid to Ukraine.
That kind of stands to reason.
That's understandable, if you could say it like that. We can also see some of the East European countries also more generous than others. But countries like
Hungary.
Yeah, but
Isn't
countries,
Austria the best example of that? That they export 90% of their gas from Russia. And Germany as well.
In the 3 years, Austria haven't spent one single euro on military aid to Ukraine. But they have bought a hell lot of Russian gas.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit like, I'm just saying is, if you send more money to Putin than you send to Ukraine, it's just like if you go down to the bookmaker, want to play, you know?
We're hedging the bet.
Yes.
I'll just say, by the way, Pierre, on your matter of electricity, gas is also used in electricity generation. Just to defend my position.
In the case of France,
probably not.
We export all the electricity generated from.
So when you import LNG, it'll be for like domestic use or whatever. Okay, John. So I think that's a point well made, but I still want to keep bringing it back to telecoms, or at least telecoms adjacent stuff, i.e., business. And do you think now? I don't know if you think you've answered this already. I don't feel like you have. Do you think that Europe is responding to the pressure that's being put on it by the US to raise its game?
They're pulling the act together. But to be honest, what's happened after Zelensky got this very unprecedented treatment in the White House, he went around Europe, come to London first. They're hugging him and feeling sorry for you, but no commitments. Okay?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit like, I feel sorry for you, but fuck off, okay? Sorry my language, but that's basically what they did, okay?
You can swear on this podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I must be honest, as a European, I think it's a disgrace, because I think we should have done something to stop this war a long time ago. And we could have done it in two ways, either to find a way to create some negotiation. Fine, that's one way. Or we could have been giving Ukraine more military aid faster and in a better quality than we've been doing.
That might be one. If you're going to hang around after, that might be one for the pub because it's a bit tangential. But it reminds me of a tangent that Ian and I have gone over a few times, so maybe we'll revisit that in the pub. The other really geopolitical bit as it affects the US, which affects business, which, as you can tell, is what I'm always trying to steer it back to so that we don't just go off and talk pure politics, is tariffs.
Yes. And
tariffs was definitely an elephant in the room at Mobile World Congress, and it seems to have massively accelerated since then. I think Pierre, he's going on about tariffs on champagne and stuff, isn't he?
Champagne and wine, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Actually,
what are your thoughts? I want to know two things from you, John. And sorry, I haven't really invited you in yet, Ian. I will.
I'll come in when the telecom conversation.
Yeah.
I thought this is a telecom podcast.
I know. Well, you can see I'm trying to keep steering it back.
I'll have another beer while you're chatting about wine and
is
Ukraine,
there anything
though.
that's not weapons grade, though?
This isn't weapons grade, I don't think. Wingman.
I mean, I'm sure people would love to learn my views on Ukraine, but that's not what I'm paid to do on this podcast.
Don't worry, we're moving on from that. But tariffs are relevant in so much as they affect all trade. What do you think, John, about the approach to tariffs, how Europe's dealing with it, how it's going to affect global trade, how it's going to affect all of our fortunes economically?
Yeah, let me say it very simple. I know that Trump, he loves the word tariffs, and he turns it in. I think you can.
Let me tell you,
it's a beautiful word.
It's a beautiful word.
Tariffs.
But let's be honest. Listen, don't take him literally what he's saying. Okay.
Well, but he's acting on it. It's not just his words.
I know. Listen.
He lies so much.
Listen. He have to be in office for 208 weeks. Okay. When this week is over, he's been working for 8 weeks. So there's 200 weeks more to go. Okay.
God, really?
Yes. Okay.
Thanks for reminding us of that.
That's the reality. Second thing, what's important to understand is he do things in an unorthodox way. Okay. We can easily agree about that.
I think we can.
You can like it or dislike it, okay? But we see there's a process going on right now in the Middle East, okay? Which actually, we have hostages which came out, it been a ceasefire for some time, or actually for 8 weeks. And actually, it's the beginning of an important process. We also see that Ukraine have accepted some conditions for a ceasefire, and let's see what's happened with that.
What's that got to do with tariffs, John?
No, let me come back to the tariffs. The tariffs
if you would.
The tariffs is...
He's doing a weave.
No.
I call it a weave.
No, listen, the tariffs is... Some of the tariffs, when he criticized Europe, is fully correct, and some of them is fully bullshit. Okay?
Right, fair enough.
So Europe have done some of these calculations, talking about what's this balance between, and how much do we import, and how much do we export, and so on. And in that way, Europe says there's a balance in the tariffs between US and Europe. The reality is, if you are working on a car factory in Europe and producing a car, it depends on which kind of car you're producing. Not if you're doing small trucks, but other cars, then there's a low import tax in the US. If a similar car comes from the US to Europe, then there's a high import tax. Okay. So that's a reality. So if I'm in the car industry, okay,
I have a very good answer for that.
Then it's quite relevant, okay? It's quite relevant for me what the tariffs is and how they become, okay? Because each person lives in different industries, and different industries get affected in different ways. That's important to understand. We also know that Europe is very good at tariffs because we in Europe have a lot of inefficient farmers, particularly in the southern part of Europe, who get heavily subsidized, okay?
Yeah.
And we protect them from more efficient farmers across the world, which can produce the same products, maybe cheaper, better, whatever.
We've been doing that forever. Common agricultural policy.
Africa is complaining of that big time. It says don't give them opportunity to invest in agriculture industry and expand the agriculture industry in Africa. And of course, you have a very efficient agriculture industry in the US, which also get affected by it. But that's how it is. So it gets a lot of attention when Trump is saying it, but it's not a new problem. It's not a new issue. It's an old issue.
But it seems to be put on steroids now. It's been really amplified, really.
No, but I think it's what's happening is instead of it's something we've been discussed among experts and people which really works with these things, are inflected by the industries, then they become something the taxi drivers talking about or people talk about at the pub, okay?
Yeah.
I would say with the import taxes on champagne, great, because then there would be more champagne for Europe, then the champagne prices would go down.
Yeah,
great.
It's about twice the cost.
Yes.
But I want to.
And then they don't have to send the champagne all the way to America. That's good for the environment.
Yeah, I look forward to buying my $70 bottles, £70 bottles of champagne in the future.
I want to invite you in, even though this isn't Telecoms, and thank you for humouring me, but you're a regular reader of The Economist. You're very economically literate and very geopolitically literate. What do you think about, I mean, I'll put my stake in the ground. I think tariffs on the whole are bullshit. I don't see why there need to be any
totally
tariffs
agree.
at all. But, what do you think about tariffs in general, and what do you think about the current sort of escalation of all that stuff?
I'm not a supporter of tariffs, and I think John's point about Europe and agricultural tariffs is spot on, but I don't think that justifies the tariffs that Trump's instituting now. I think he has a very protectionist view of the world, clearly, and I think in America first, I think it's very isolationist. It's almost going back to a sort of view of America.
But sorry, isn't Europe like that too? Isn't it Europe first? This is good for Europe. Have you ever heard the European Union saying, or any prime minister in any country, including your own, this is good for England? Okay. Macron, this is good. Oh, he's the one talking about this is good for Europe.
You were saying, Ian?
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody wants to do well, and there's competition, but you participate in a global trade system, you sign up to certain principles. I think Trump's not interested in that. I think Trump's a very transactional kind of president. I mean, I didn't want to get into this conversation. It's nothing to do with telecom, but I think he's a very transactional person who will always do things that he thinks advantage him, basically.
Yeah, he's voters.
America.
Yeah, of course.
And I don't think he gives a shit about Ukraine and what happens to Ukraine. The only reason he cares about Ukraine is what he can get out of it. The only reason for his whole tariff policy is because he thinks it will make a very American support him throughout his presidency, and I think that's what it's all about.
But I think there's
and I think the tariffs, by the way, are. I mean, you said I'm economically literate. I'm not an economics expert, but if you look at what The Economist is saying, actually in most economic journals, and I have to sort of agree with. I have to go along with that.
Defer to their expertise.
It's like climate change science, isn't it? You kind of try and go along with the majority of experts. Most of them think that it's going to be pretty bad for the world economy.
And I think so too.
I think it's going to be a bit of a disaster for the world economy.
Wall Street showed that.
It's economic vandalism is what it is.
But also, let's be honest. Sometimes why you put tariffs in is because there's countries which subsidize certain industries. Okay.
Yeah. So reciprocal tariffs.
That's basically a way to say, hey, you subsidize this industry. We saw it with steel in Europe from China and steel towers produced in China. That's one thing. Sometimes these products are not produced under the same environmental rules as we have in Europe that will say these companies have lower production costs. If you look at Temu, which is very popular across Europe, selling tons of stuff, there've been done a numbers of surveys about do they live up to the environmental things regarding the stuff you buy and so on.
Shein as well.
Yeah, that's different.
And then there's of course salaries, because that's fine if we have a totally free market. Then the guy working in a car factory in England, there's not many of them left, but anyhow, he should get the same salary to compete with the guy working in a car factory in China or in India,
which is fuck all.
Yeah. So
that's why in here they only make premium cars.
Yeah. And why globalization? A lot of globalization is the import of wage deflation, and everyone knows that, and that's the kind of thing that national populists like Trump are making a big stand of pushing against.
Yeah, but the point of globalization is that you focus on the things that you do well.
Comparative advantage.
Yeah. But let's be honest, this globalization
so
idea...
we ceded manufacturing to Asia, but we focus on services. And if you end all that and every country just does if every country goes to a system where they're not going to trade and they're just going to do their own things...
Autocracy, or autarky.
I mean, that's going to work out quite well for countries like America, potentially, or China, because
But I don't think it will work out for America.
Well, I don't think...
Because it will drive the cost of... Inflation's going to be a really interesting thing.
But it doesn't work out for Europe, because Europe's not a single country.
Yeah.
So you don't have the scale in a unless you can somehow have some kind of federal states of Europe, which I don't think is ever going to happen.
What's the population of Europe compared to the US, actually?
It's big. It's like 500 million.
500 million.
So it's bigger, yeah.
It's big.
America about 350, something like that?
340.
If it was a single country with a single language, with a common view, there's and a huge amount of talent.
But it's I think it's to be honest, in a global economy, Europe are in a very bad shape, okay? Because we get high salaries, we retire early, okay?
Yeah.
We take half a year off.
We have additional restrictions on everything, environmental, whatever you do. So the cost of doing things is very expensive, and we
make cool shit.
We make there is some cool shit made in Europe.
They love our cars.
Yeah, but I must also say one thing is we cannot make those cars. We don't create tech companies.
Can I bring it back to telecom?
Yes,
it's really gone off on a tangent.
Yeah,
we make telecom stuff. Nokia and Ericsson.
Yeah.
I mean,
and back in the in the 80s, we were the pioneers of the technology as well.
But why not try and bring that into the Nokia and Ericsson?
Well, I tell you what, I will. Indulge me 5 more minutes because I want to wrap up this more political side. And my defence for talking about it is because, I think
the political side is very relevant for them, though. It's exactly connected.
But my defence for talking about it in general is, as I wrote, my headline of my wrap-up piece from Mobile World Congress was MWC was more political than ever in 2025, and a few people had been kind enough to say that they thought it represented a lot of the conversations that happened there. But I am going to wrap it up. So just indulge me. Sorry, actually, before I do, John, you were trying to get a word in. So before I wrap up, did you have some last thoughts on this more political side of it?
I think it's... listen, I think we overinterpret Trump, and that's the way because he's the way he's talk. I hope my kids never will talk like him. But honestly, right now, he's stirring up the world. He's done a lot in 8 weeks. A lot of bad things, probably. But he also done a lot of great things. Europe is pulling the act together, okay? And if I was, I know a number of members of Ukrainian Parliament. When I shared these research with them and said, look at these numbers, some of them was really shocked, okay? So this is your friends, okay?
Yeah.
And my personal opinion is like, we have to make a decision. Either we let Ukraine be a part of Russia and let them be there, or we help them. Okay, and there's 2 ways we can help them: weapons or negotiations. And I must just say, big parts of Europe have not been providing them with the weapons they needed, and if they have done it, they've done it late. And I must also say that negotiation, we haven't done anything since Macron had his 11 conversations with Putin in 2022. And I think it's to be honest, this has nothing to do with Trump, okay? This is a neighbor country, this is a region. We also look at the Ukrainian refugees coming to Europe. We treat them in different ways. So take an example. In Germany, they say you need to learn the language before you go out and work. And 20% of the Ukrainian refugees in Germany is out on the labor market. In the Netherlands, they're much better. It's 60%. In Denmark, we say, welcome to Denmark, you have to work. 80% on the labor market. They get full salary, pay taxes, and the cost of having these Ukrainian refugees is not a cost. But on the other side is, forget the economy here. How do you imagine to be in a refugee from a war where you have family and friends which are part of the war? You're sitting in another country, and you're sitting on a couch at home, watching news, on your phone, on your TV, whatever, versus being in the labor market, doing a difference, making a salary, having a life. I think it's also a way, it's a better way to help these people.
Okay.
Yeah?
My wrap up is very much big picture, and it's the big picture that makes it, if not directly telecoms, then relevant to telecoms, because everything that happens that affects the global trade system and affects, I suppose, to some extent, the more geopolitical environment, at least as we get into a multipolar world where we're forced to pick Team America, Team Europe, Team China, or whatever, does affect all industries, including telecoms. But my wrap-up thoughts on what's going on with Trump is he's basically reframed global politics to make it much more about brute force rather than diplomacy. That's how it comes over to me.
It's true. 100%.
And in some ways, fair enough, because 'twas ever thus. I mean, when it comes down to it, civilization, my perception of civilization and of laws and of civility and of civil society is it's designed to make brute force less important. When we were cavemen, the biggest caveman will club everyone else over the head, and that caveman would ruin everything. And then as we get more civil, you don't need to be big and strong. And obviously this helps, for example, with sexual equality, because men are naturally bigger and stronger than women and all that sort of thing. So civility is about taking brute force away from it. And in some ways...
So he's gone back to caveman, yeah?
He's gone
full caveman.
But then on the flip side, regardless of civility, the matter of force and power is always there in the background. Sooner or later, you could, it doesn't happen in our job, but let's say in our job, the person who pays your salary, they say, Ian, do this, and you go no, and they go, well, do it or you're fired. Well, that's an imposition of force, isn't it?
Yeah, I know, but I'm not saying I encourage that. I think the whole human condition has been trying to find a way of getting away from strong men.
That was my point. I completely agree.
I mean, I know they love them in some countries, but
so I'm not
in America at the moment.
Well, quite, and I'm not necessarily endorsing it. I'm just trying to call it as it seems to be. And so that's what he's doing. He goes, here are the facts on the ground. That humiliation of Zelensky in the White House ultimately came down to, we've got all the money and guns, you got fuck all, get back in.
By the way, I don't think Zelensky was humiliated in the White House, is my take on that, if I'm going to chip in. I actually thought he came out of that incredibly dignified compared to those two other Muppets next to him.
Certainly.
I thought he came out of it really well. I mean, that worst one was that J.D. Vance.
Well, we might save this for the pub as well.
Little grotesque individual that he is.
Yeah, he did get very stroppy. But anyway, but there were power politics at play there.
Yeah.
And Trump and Vance were definitely going, we represent the people with all the guns and the money. You're not the bloke with the guns and the money, so fucking do what you're told.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what he's doing to Europe. And when J.D. Vance came over and did that Munich Security Conference thing and sort of bent a bunch of Europeans out of shape, he was doing that as well. He was going, look, we're America. We don't like the way you're doing things over here in Europe. Either you do things our way or fuck off and do it by yourself. So there's just some very crude, brute force stuff going on, which isn't necessarily, I'm not even necessarily saying it's good or bad. I'm just identifying it for
Europe
what it is.
Europe is still the same. Listen, there was a referendum in, I think it was a note from the European Parliament about they didn't want to see Trump as the president and so on. You see lots of Europeans criticizing the American, during the election, don't support Trump and so on. Listen, I don't think there's one single member of the European Parliament was not in the public space have taken a stand on how the American president election. Okay, that's reality. And,
of course.
And it's not. I don't have to defend it, but just saying it's like. Every time people criticize or say something on the one side, always flip the coin and said, what's on the other side? Okay? What's a fact? Yeah. That's when we did the study. We say, how is with Chinese equipment implementation of 5G toolbox versus helping Ukraine? It's putting things into a perspective.
5G got mentioned.
Yeah,
Telecom relevant.
I'm about to wrap up, mate, and I'm about to invite you to talk about.
We can talk about the Huawei stuff.
No,
we will.
Yeah.
But let me quickly finish.
Let me say one thing. This is very relevant for telecom. So we have done a numbers of workshops for operators across the world explaining what is Trump 2.0 since November 7. And I've done it in Asia, I've done it in Latin America, done it in Africa.
It's like Die Hard 4.0, right?
Yeah.
It's like...
Why has everything got to be 0.0?
Just to understand it, okay? And I understand why people can't understand it.
In your piece,
no, but I understand why people can't understand it. But it's quite relevant, okay? Because what will US-China policy be? Will they be more tough on China, Huawei, and so on? So it's quite relevant to understand what's going on, and it have an implication, okay? And the reality is, let's take this scenario, okay? Trump gets success in the Middle East, in Ukraine. And find a new new deal with Canada and Mexico, which they like.
Gaza's just going to be a golf course, isn't it?
No, listen, and he do this in 6 or 12 months.
That's how long it takes to build a golf course.
Yes, but let's say he do that. Okay, take that scenario. What will European voters demand? They want politicians to do something.
Yeah.
So when did you have the Brexit? That was in
2016.
Well, that's when it was voted for. I think it happened in 2020.
So look at it.
If indeed it ever happened.
What have the British government done to solve the problems which have been occurred by Brexit? What have the European Union done? Zero. Okay?
Yeah.
So the reality is we have European Union which haven't done anything to end the war in Ukraine for 3 years, except sending some money. Okay? but not trying to find a way to stop it. Okay, so what I could fear is that if you in the U.S. get a president who do things in a brutal way, whatever, succeed to create a lot of results, which a lot of people will say, this is great for me, this is great for the world. Okay, then European voters would demand to have politicians who do the same in their country. And what I can fear is those politicians which will offer that kind of politics in Europe is the kind of politicians I will definitely never support, if you understand.
I think I know what you're saying. Yeah. Well, that's the danger, isn't it? When you.
I thought there was a danger of a telecom thing coming up there.
Well, it's about to.
It is.
Bear with me, man. I'm nearly there.
Listen, this is telecom, and I speak
John,
to a lot of executives of telecom operators every day, and trust me, they talk about this all the time.
Exactly, it does come up. So let me bookend that. Finish it off. I think you made a really good point, John, and your point is also well made about when you upend politics, you get more fringe political figures coming in, and fuck knows what might be going on there. But we won't go down that tangent now. Maybe that's another one for the pub. So just to finish off on this more sort of brutal approach, and I take your point, there could be some very positive unintended consequences, like lighting a fire under complacent Europeans and all that sort of thing. But then the flip side, there was one thing I mentioned in my write-up that I can't attribute because it was off the record, but a senior exec at a major European operator told me that the US had told them they got to scrap their diversity and inclusion policy to be in line with theirs, or they're not going to do business with them. That is one example, together with a lot of this tariff stuff, which I agree with Ian, I think is bollocks, of them overstepping. But then I take your point, John, they're going to overstep. And I guess all we can hope is that the 51% of what they do is positive. Or 51% plus. Anyway, so
that's
I will.
The taxi driver told me when I came over here. He said exactly what you're saying.
Good luck hoping for that.
Yeah. Well, exactly. All right. So I'll draw a line under the more overtly political stuff there. I've got a little segue for you, Ian. One thing I said in my write-up is, John earlier was talking about how Europe's never really paid its fair share of military spend for NATO. And now everyone's spending more and more on the military. Bear with me, it's getting there. One of the things Nokia said on its Sunday one is that a major new area of business for theirs is defence.
Yeah.
And I reflected in my write-up, I was like, God, they might be onto something there, because there's obviously going to be a lot more money being thrown around in defence. And it's clear to see how mobile comms especially is going to be intrinsic part drones, just communication between people and that sort of thing. Anyway, that's my clunky segue to invite you to talk about more.
Yeah, well, I started
stuff.
My story on Nokia out with a reference to their military stuff.
It's almost like we planned this.
They have one of these backpacks. I think they call it Banshee, which is you as a soldier you wear.
It's a good name because it's like a loud shout.
It's a great name. But it's like a core.
Do you need more beer, John?
Yes, please.
It's a core and a RAN in a backpack. It's like a khaki backpack with.
You give me one of those, which is
antennas that come up. They look like baseball bats. These antennas that kind of stick up above your head. But Earl Lum wore one actually at the stand.
Oh, we met Earl. Hello, Earl. If you're listening, it was good to meet him.
I spoke to Earl this week, but he put one on the stand, and he said it's really light. I mean, obviously it has to be light because you've got to be able to sort of move around, but. Yeah, I mean, I think they bought a defence company.
Yeah.
And that's obviously a massive area of... I mean, the NATO increase in spending is great for them, like the European commitment, because they're obviously looking for growth areas. But
I think a lot of their Nokia's defence stuff's in the States as well, isn't it?
It's in the States as well, but they also see opportunities to sell, obviously, to NATO countries. So apparently older systems that would be used at the moment they're good for voice, but they're sort of 3G capable on the data side of things.
Okay.
So I think Tommy Wito is saying if you put 4G and 5G into it, you kind of lower the cost by a tenth. So it's like a massive market, basically.
Right.
If like if NATO and European forces, American forces are going to sort of look to them to sort of supply equipment, then there's a massive opportunity. If people are raising defence budgets, then it's like a really smart move. And they've made a bigger deal of that, I think, than Ericsson has recently.
I haven't heard Ericsson talk about it at all.
I haven't really heard Ericsson talk about it, so I think that's a really big thing for them. But go on.
It's quite interesting because the Norwegian military was just been out with a case where two of the Norwegian operators have been using a 5G slice in a military exercise.
Yeah.
So the military in Norway was using the mobile operator's network, and then they got a slice on 5G. and use that for communication solutions.
Yep.
And this is quite interesting because then you can say the military get the full access to, let's say there's 2 or 3 networks in a country, full access to 2 or 3 networks. They can do whatever they can do. You can give them a slice. In case of war, they can switch between the different networks and so on. But basically, the operators, when there's not a war, not happening, any crisis, whatever, then the operators can use the spectrum. In the US, you have a huge spectrum issues because the military is sitting on the main part of the spectrum. And basically, the military says we need our own spectrum. And there's people inside Pentagon who have a dream of building their own 5G networks across the US, yeah? And where I think it's much better to give the spectrum to the existing operators, use their networks, okay? You get a better utilization of the hardware infrastructure, the networks, and you get a better utilization of the spectrum.
It's like it's the private-public use case in a very good example of it.
Since right now there's a very good case I read from Norway, and one of my colleagues, when I sent it to him this morning, he said, I have a similar case on my desk from Sweden.
Yep.
And we know both that Nokia have been very active in this space and talk a lot about it. And I think it's quite interesting because it is a place where the operators maybe could get a premium for their services and they can be a part of a private-public networks.
Yep.
And you can justify better coverage. You can better emergency power for the network. Which is also important in case of emergency situations.
So they have a deal with Lockheed Martin. I think it was talked about at the press event.
No, one of the big American defense contractors.
Which is very much to do with what John's talking about. Yeah. So that's like that's not the backpack stuff. That's actually doing like base stations that you would almost deploy in a field, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a private network. It's like something you put up that's on a sort of temporary basis that you could use as a core and a RAN.
And it's easy to see why...
It's on dedicated spectrum that...
And it's so easy to see why communications could be a massive tactical advantage in the battlefield.
Yeah.
Coordination, drones, etc.
But that's like, out of their various things that they do, mobile's like obviously in a bad place for everybody, has been. It's like flattened out this year.
In terms of revenues.
Like in terms of growth, like the RAN's like pretty like badly down in the last 2 years, flat now. But if you're going to look at areas where there's growth in that, it's probably in like military is like a big one, I would say at the moment.
Yes, well, that's hard to argue with, and that completely overlaps with what we were just banging on about before. And Ian, you wrote out some other stuff. I mean, Nokia seems to have represented quite a lot of the emerging trends, like another thing they were talking about a lot. And we did touch on it in the pod we did from the show floor, which is AI RAN.
Yeah.
And I said at the time, I'm still not sure what the fuck AI RAN is. And you explained Nokia's perspective perfectly well. But any further thoughts on that? I think you've written some stuff up about that since, haven't you?
Yeah. Can I get another beer?
Yeah, sure.
In the meantime. Yeah, so I spoke with Tommy Wheato at the event, at the press event. And... yeah, they have AI RAN's like a massive theme, I think, of the industry at the moment, and was like a big talking point at the show. And it's like, what does it mean? People are sort of positioning it, I think, as a sort of successor to the Open RAN, virtual RAN stuff to some extent. I mean, it's NVIDIA's attempt to a big extent, I think, to try and,
NVIDIA being the chip company we most associate with AI.
NVIDIA being the sort of big AI chips company to kind of have its stake in the... I mean, NVIDIA doesn't care really about the RAN. What NVIDIA wants to do is sell more GPUs.
Yes.
So AI RAN for them really is an opportunity for them to sell GPUs to telcos or to.
Is it basically just an extension of something that you've been writing about with great authority for years now? It seems, which is like the Intel side of things,
well, it could be,
and the general purpose computing.
Yeah, I mean, so there is definitely a view in the industry at the moment from people that I spoke to who wouldn't want to go on record saying it, but it's clearly the case that, and it's multiple people who said this, that the companies like Ericsson and Nokia that have done their own. I mean, this has been going on for a few years anyway now. That have been doing their own. Like they've lost out to the IT companies to some extent in the last sort of 10 years. The trend of virtualization has meant that they've retreated from some of the stuff they used to do, some of the hardware stuff that they would have done, certainly in the core side of things. is now done by people like Dell and Intel.
And virtualization, in its essence, putting it into words of one syllable, I can understand it. A lot of it is about taking stuff away from the immediate appliance and doing that computing in a remote location.
Giving up doing like dedicated appliances that you would post on site and putting it into a sort of taking advantage of common IT technologies, basically, to do that stuff, and running on cloud computing platforms. And the argument, I mean, that NFV virtualization trend's been a big deal in certain segments of the market for a long time, like the core network. It's pretty well advanced, but the radio access network's a lot more complicated. It's kind of high end, so it's like real time. It's like really hard to do, so it's a much bigger challenge. And where the benefits have not always been very clear of doing this anyway, to virtualize and host it at the mast site still.
Yeah, it's good PowerPoint, but in practice...
It's good PowerPoint, but in practice, what are the cost savings? It's like, what are the advantages of doing it?
It's a bit like some of the Open RAN stuff, like the promises made originally versus the reality now. Yeah,
they get conflated, but they're slightly different. But the virtual RAN, Ericsson talks a good game here with the project it has with Intel. Samsung's big with the Verizon deployment. A lot of that's like virtual RAN, and people like Joe Russo, he's not the CTO, he's sort of above CTO level, because the CTO is Iago Tenorio now, isn't it?
Right.
He's sort of above him. He sort of talks up that being like you can automate things more easily, you can sort of centralize stuff, and you can do updates on mast sites more easily than you would have done in a purpose-built RAN. But for me, and this is what I've been told by people in the chip industry who were talking about, by the way, people who are doing custom chip stuff, is the RAN market is just not big enough nowadays.
And there's no growth in it.
There's no growth in it. They were making, 45 billion in product sales in, these are Omdia's numbers, in sort of 2022.
And it's mainly, the main part of that cost is software.
Yeah, that's products. That's equipment. That's all the RAM product sales, basically. And it went down by 5 billion in 2023. It went down by 5 billion in 2024. So you're at 35 billion this year. The projection is for it to be stable. But you look at that in the context of like those same guys, like Ericsson doing its own custom ASICs, putting the money that it puts into it, and then trying to get capacity with TSMC to produce those chips, when TSMC has got all these back orders to do GPUs for NVIDIA, which is a massively growing market. It's like people are, is there enough investment going into the RAN?
Yeah, and every day you hear about someone spending 100 billion on data centers, and that's
it's not a telecom specific question. It would be the same as somebody from another sector doing custom chips for that market. Is like everybody's thinking, it's about piggybacking, like riding in the slipstream of a bigger industry and seeing what you can get from it. And that really is for me, that's what virtual RAN's about. It's like Intel's position's always been, does it make more sense to take advantage of general purpose processors and actually let Ericsson, Nokia focus on what they do best, which is radio unit expertise and the IP, the intellectual property that goes into that, and the chips that host that stuff is basically Xeon, and the kind of it's the same fundamentals that they're using for servers that you'd sell to Walmart or whatever. And NVIDIA's now come along with this, just CPUs are old, they're an old story, like they're not that efficient.
Which it would.
x86 is not, there's question marks about x86.
One thing I will say, and this isn't in any way to poison the well of whatever NVIDIA's saying, but going all the way back to 2 jobs before this one, NVIDIA's been at war with Intel in terms of the propaganda. So this is a well-trodden path. Yeah,
and people would say, well, GPUs, they're not really general-purpose chips. They're kind of, they're basically...
But they've been going on about GPUs for ages.
But they're trying to position them as general-purpose chips of the future, moving into an AI world. So the whole AI RAN thing, which I think they were probably the first people to kind of use that as a kind of term a couple of years ago, is about this idea that you would use they've already sold loads of these things to hyperscalers, obviously looking for other markets where they can sell their GPUs. Like, why not operators because they have loads of properties, like they're companies that have loads of edge properties. You put your GPUs into an edge facility that's closer to the user. This is the idea of edge computing. Maybe there's some benefit in doing that because you can get services delivered at the edge of the network that will be harder to deliver in a big hyperscaler center, and you provide.
And there's the latency thing.
That's the big thing. There's the latency thing. You provide the computing applications for AI on that GPU infrastructure, but you also use the GPU infrastructure to do your radio access network, because then the economics really make sense. If you're making money out of selling like AI applications, then why not host your radio access network infrastructure?
Do as much
so for people like
possible.
Nokia and Ericsson and the guys who are in the RAN space, who've done their dedicated custom chips to do that, and their whole like software streams are dedicated to doing that, or they've worked with Intel on virtual RAN, it's like a massive question.
But one thing here is also, if we put the GPUs on the base station.
No one believes it, by the way, at the moment.
No, because everyone I talk to and ask the question is, so, okay, what is the benefit of bringing it there versus having them back there, okay?
Yeah.
And everyone I talk to, they say, listen, you need more GPUs if you have to put them, let's say in the country you have 50,000 base stations. So you need to put the GPUs on 50,000 base stations. But they say if you put the half of those GPUs in a central spot in the same country, okay, you get a better solution.
Yeah.
And actually the latency from the base station to where the GPUs is nothing. It's still nothing. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, then that's the problem. The economics of that edge computing case just don't add up at the moment, which is a shame for the telcos, because that will be a potential way for them to monetize edge computing.
But then the question is, if they put more equipment out of the towers, then the question is, then the tower company will increase the rent because you have more equipment.
Because you've got captive.
Yeah, well, you've obviously got to balance the numbers. If you can make a shitload of money from selling edge computing services
then you
at
can
the edge of the
easily
network,
justify
then
the
no one's
tower.
going to. But obviously the question is, if you're putting GPUs at the edge of the network, there's a huge cost there to do it. I mean, by the way, it's not putting more equipment, because the idea, this is the whole idea of using it for RAN compute as well, is that you'd replace what you're doing.
Same.
And that's the trial that SoftBank's doing in Japan. They're the kind of big cheerleader for it, is that they're doing this thing at 20 cells where they're using sort of NVIDIA GPUs to do the RAN, and they're trying to do sort of AI inferencing as well. But that's the pitch, and the Nokia take on that at the moment really is that they're not all in with there's two sides of it. There's the AI and RAN, which is what John was just saying, is like, why would you put a GPU at the edge of the network? Because it's not really clear that there's any applications you could do there.
Versus having it in a data center.
In a data center. That's the AI and RAN. And then there's the AI for RAN side of things.
Just optimizing the RAN.
If you put it on a GPU, can you do some whizzy stuff that you couldn't do if it was on custom silicon? And the position Tommy Wheato went on record saying this, is that they use Marvell for their layer 1 chips. That's like the kind of physical layer, the kind of hardcore like signal processing stuff.
The solution they did after Intel fucked them.
Although I'm not sure Intel was in that specific area, but they were doing they're doing their layer 1 with Intel is in that area, but I mean, they're doing their layer 1 Marvel, and they have AI and ML built into those chips. Those Marvel chips are really kind of like they incorporate AI and ML algorithms, and the position that Nokia's got is there's nothing you can really do to improve RAN efficiency that much on a GPU that you couldn't do on its custom-built Marvell chips. And Ericsson undoubtedly would say the same about the ASICs that it does. And Samsung has, Samsung's done an announcement this week. I don't know if you saw that went out with NVIDIA.
I think we covered it. Yeah.
So I tried to dig into that a bit more. Because
our headline was Samsung ramps up AI RAN effort with help from NVIDIA.
It's not. There's no development in that at all. They're not using NVIDIA's GPUs to do RAN processing.
Yeah.
They're using Xeon processors. So all it is, it's pretty much what Nokia's doing. Nokia's now sort of been introduced into the SoftBank community, but they're not putting their RAN software on GPUs. They're still using their own custom chips to do it.
This touches on a bit of an issue I've got with almost everything that ends in RAN these days, Open RAN, vRAN, AI RAN, whatever RAN, is a lot of it, I'll admit, and I've said this various times on the pod, a lot of it gets a bit abstract and I do get a bit lost, especially the distinctions between them. And you've made much more of a point of getting elbows deep on this stuff than I have. But, I'm just looking at the quote from the announcement you just said from earlier on in the week at Samsung. Here's a quote from Ronnie Vasishta, right, who's the SVP for Telecom for NVIDIA.
He's basically in charge of Telecom for NVIDIA.
Yeah. So here's his quote on that. AI RAN is a critical technology that delivers transformative gains in network utilization, efficiency and performance while enabling new AI services. Samsung is a frontrunner in AI RAN development. Their vRAN expertise and software integrated with NVIDIA's AI accelerated computing will accelerate the path to AI native wireless networks. That just all seems like fucking gibberish.
He's much more interested in that if you actually get him on the phone.
This isn't a dig at Ronnie. That
was obviously written by someone who Ronnie signed this off and he went,
I'll stress, it's not a go at the individual or even at the company. It's just slightly emblematic of where I struggle with this stuff, is it all seems a bit abstract, a bit esoteric, a bit vague.
It's very simple. You have an industry which to a certain extent have been commoditized.
Yeah.
The RAN market.
Totally.
And if you want to bring up the value of the products you're selling, you have to give it funny names like this beer from the Northern Monk Brewery. It's called Faith.
Thanks, John. We've been drinking John's beers.
That's okay.
We'll get on topic of bribery last.
I agree. But listen, if it just takes a beer to bribe you,
well,
I'm a
cheap date, mate.
Don't tell it to anyone.
Too late.
No, but I think it's very important to say that you need to find ways to add value, and you do that by adding new technologies, new services, and so on top of the networks.
Yeah.
And if you look at this telecom industry, the operators, all the value which have been added on top of the networks, have been going to the OTT guys.
Well, it's been added by the OTT guys.
Yes, but they get all the benefits. Okay.
Well, they should because they've added the value.
No, that's fine. But you look at the telecom operator's share of your spending on your phone.
Yeah.
15 years ago, it will be 90%.
Yeah.
Today, it's maybe 30% or 20%. And for some, it's maybe down as 10%. Depends on which market you're in.
Yeah.
So it's very obvious that the guys who do the RAN, they try to find new ways to add new service on top of it. We had a lot about the APIs at Mobile World Congress and all those things. So they try to find a way. We also see the operators talking about they try to do these things. And, if we come back to the APIs, I think it's important to say that, people talk about the open gateway, they talk about all these things. And there was a lot of people I spoke to who basically says, oh, this will grow. Just wait to see the future. And then I said to them, do you remember Open RAN? No, it's not. One API, sorry. And then they looked at me, one API? Yes, that was GSMA launched in 2009 in Mobile World Congress. So the reality is that industries is trying, okay? Sometimes they succeed.
Yeah.
Sometimes it will be one player who succeeds. Sometimes it will be another player who succeeds. Someone take a bet on a supplier, and it goes wrong. Okay.
Yeah, but the API stuff's quite interesting, I think, because not because I think that the API transactions themselves are going to be a big deal for the telcos, because they won't. I think Omdia's forecast is it's like 9 billion in 2028
for the whole world.
By the way, that point about the 90% of it's taken by over-the-top companies nowadays. I agree with that, but that's because the market has become a lot bigger. It's not like they've taken anything away from the telcos. The telco market itself is still bigger than it was years ago. It's not like they've chomped into it. But the reason the APIs are interesting is because you could, and this should be right up your street, really, is that what they're saying, if you talk to people like Nicholas Heuveldop at Ericsson, who's in charge of the whole, he's the boss of Aduna, he will say what you need to see is APIs being provisioned to do with things like quality of experience for, let's say, an aeroplane company or a car manufacturer, where they will be prepared to pay you something for the extra usage on the network. And it's not the transaction revenues that are important, it's the extra usage revenues that you open up from having these core network features that you couldn't provide before. Now, by the way, I'm not saying I buy into this, but I still feel that it's an interesting pitch.
Yes, but a lot of these APIs already exist in Google Cloud and AWS.
I'm not talking about APIs. I'm talking about the if you do it in a coordinated way, which it hasn't been done before, you talk to anybody and they'll all say that whole what's happening now with Kamara and like Open Gateway was not done very well in the past. And
it had been done, but not very well.
Not very well. So everybody's a lot more.
Never be a commercial success.
No, everybody's a lot more optimistic about the standardization that's happening at the moment than had happened before. They're never going to make money from API transactions like Vonage will or Infobip or whatever. But the real value is, does the API then unlock an opportunity for you to say, by the way, I'm not buying into this, but this is the pitch. From a consumer side, I want a gaming slice that I'm prepared to pay more for a certain amount of time. Or if I'm a car manufacturer, I want to pay for a slice of a network that allows me to provision this for a certain segment of the market. Or if I'm an airplane company, I'm prepared, but through an API to pay for this kind of. It's the extra usage. This is why you get these McKinsey reports that have come out with. The numbers are crazy, like this 300 billion in revenues. But the whole thing is not API revenues. Was
that the guy with the scarf that you slagged off?
Yeah, it was. And by the way, I don't agree with those figures. But if it's going to work out, it's not from API transactions. It's from additional usage revenues. And this is why I'm saying it should be up your street, because that's surely where the industry's gone wrong. The industry's gone wrong by saying use whatever you want every month and just pay us 10 quid.
I totally agree. And
that's what this is trying to change.
Listen, it's quite interesting is all those who do OTT services, just to make it very simple, they have a pay-as-you-grow model, okay? Very simple business model. If you have an iPhone,
they don't have a pay-as-you-grow model. I pay £5 for Disney a month, and if I watch a million shows on Netflix on Disney, I pay £5 a month.
If you have an iPhone and you have storage in the cloud, you pay as you grow. If you use Google Cloud, you pay a little bit more, but it's still pretty big increments, isn't it? No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You know, our family plan, I don't have an iPhone, but the rest of the family have. And we pay more to Apple for the cloud, for the whole family, the family cloud.
Yeah.
Then we pay in a subscription for at least one phone a month. Okay?
It's pretty small, though.
Or two, whatever. The reality is, if the interesting thing is, and the price increase on these services is also growing faster than telecom.
Yeah.
So listen,
because there's no competition.
No. Listen, we can go back to the podcast you did with Dennis O'Brien. We talked about how this works.
Thanks for that, John.
It was a fantastic podcast. I love it.
John, for people who don't know, was the person who introduced us to Dennis O'Brien.
It doesn't matter. But anyhow,
credit where it's
but honestly, this industry is fucked. Okay, they have not been able.
It's shite.
I don't.
Bollocksed.
And honestly, they have not been able to reinvent their business models.
I don't think it's fucked.
Let me come with a very good case. In Egypt, the regulator had put a floor of how low the prices the operators are allowed to take. You know.
Yeah.
So they basically said you're not allowed to compete below this floor. And basically, one of the top guys of one of the operators in Egypt, when he got the question, why did the regulators do that? To protect us against ourselves. Okay?
Yeah.
The telecom industry's biggest enemy is the telecom industry. Okay? They're not been reinventing their business model. They've been too generous. They've been fighting. It's been a race to the bottom in many ways. Okay.
Yeah, this is where I would go along with you on the European side of things, because it's quite different depending on which region of the world you're in.
Listen,
someone like T-Mobile, share price
in the US.
By the way, I do this
People
a lot,
listening,
but I'm drawing a line going up very sharply.
Yeah.
They're a brilliant company. They're a telco company that's had an amazing performance. Would Thames Water do that?
No, I think you have a better case. Look at.
They're a utility.
Listen. At Mobile World Congress, you had the Minister of Telecommunication in India having a presentation, and we get all these emails when we are in the position we are. I wrote to the Indian guys and said, "Oh, thank you for the invitation and thank you for." At a special event meeting, and then they had his presentation at the keynote. I said, "Do you have a transcript of what he said?" And send it to me. What's interesting is that India used to be, I think, like 11 operators. Okay.
Yeah.
Race to the bottom. Vodafone have lost more money in India.
Yeah.
Than their market cap today. Okay. Basically, India is a nightmare for Vodafone. Okay.
I think it's a nightmare unless you're Reliance Geo.
Unless your surname is Ambani or Mittal, and then you're fucking laughing.
But what's interesting here is India basically said we have been spreading the spectrum out among too many operators. We have over-regulated the industry. We need a consolidation. We need to do things. So they basically said we need a consolidation of the industry, and it been consolidated to 3 operators.
Yeah.
Second thing, what they did is they put a ban on Chinese equipment. So they said you're not allowed to use Chinese equipment. And in 21 months, India have 89%, I think it is, 5G coverage. India have in 3 years succeeded. We have a problem in Europe. We need consolidation. Okay. We need better 5G coverage. We're in England right now. You get some consolidation. Yes, I agree. I'm sorry to say it. And honestly...
I bet it's great in Denmark.
Don't tell EE that, though.
Don't look up the Danish numbers, because then you will say, they're so good. Yes? But the reality is, India, with a significant lower ARPU, have surpassed Europe. And I spoke to one of the civil servants in the European Union. I think it's a disgrace that the problems we have in Europe, which everyone agree about, people like me have said it for years. Now the European Union agree with me, particularly after Draghi made his report.
Yeah.
But basically, what's interesting is that that India have surpassed Europe in 3 years.
Yeah.
And without using Chinese equipment. Okay.
Fair enough.
And to be honest, I think it just shows that if they can fix it in India, okay, why can't we fix it in Europe?
Well, it helps that they basically, whenever Geo was invented back in about 2016 or something, they basically went, "Oh, you richest bloke in India, you fucking take care of it." So that's one way of doing it, isn't it? Mukesh Ambani, he's like one of the richest men in the world, isn't he?
Yeah, but...
the whole family, the Ambani family.
Yeah.
Do you remember that wedding that took 6 months?
I do, but the big difference with India is that they were able to do it because they're a single country.
Yes. So you're juxtaposing it with the United States of Europe sort of thing.
Yeah. And that's the problem with Europe.
We are in a situation where Europe used to be the front runner on GSM and the front runner on 3G. We were not on 4G. We're definitely not on 5G. Today, US, Korea, China, and India are better on 5G than Europe. Okay?
Yeah.
Do that make you proud as a European? Definitely not.
It doesn't make me... Well, it's not a point of pride, obviously, if you're in telecom to look at that. But I just think the problem with Europe is that we have, 27 countries, plus others that aren't in the EU.
And we're not joined up.
And not joined up.
And going back to the political thing, and I'm not trying to take us back there. You could say the same about other
parts of the world that have small countries.
But I agree. But listen, if the whole idea is with the European Union to fix these things, okay? And we can't fix something which is so simple, okay?
But it doesn't surprise me that they can't fix it.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me at all.
Because we're still fragmented.
Because you can't have political union, and especially nowadays, by the way, with the example set by people like Trump, which is all about we're the most important. And you look what's going on in Germany with AfD and anti-immigration. Nobody wants to be part of a bigger Europe. Nobody wants to be part of a bigger Europe these days. Europe is over as a project, I think. This whole stuff
that's a bold claim.
This whole stuff about consolidation in Europe and Europe's a museum and it's going to get left behind. It will just happen. It will carry on.
I just want to say you will get a lot of European civil servants against you.
Yeah.
Well,
and I tell you one thing.
I'll be right in 10 years.
And honestly, listen. I think European Union have done a lot of great things, but the same thing. Copenhagen is a fantastic city, but it's run by socialists. Okay, and the next mayor of Copenhagen will probably be even more socialistic than the one we have now.
There's so many differences. Nobody can agree, and it's never going to agree. They don't even have a common language. And how can you possibly have political union without a common language?
Yeah, but it's common language.
How can you possibly have political union without a common language?
If you look at the region with Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and then you have basically in the middle of this, you have Rwanda. Rwanda used to be French language because it was a Belgian colony. And what did they do in Rwanda? They changed the official language from French to English because said all our neighbor countries English and do it.
Yeah, well, I don't think Belgium's colony experience, the colony experience of Congo, is a very good one to draw on, John.
Listen,
here,
guys, we're running out of time, so I'm going to draw that one back in. I think the interesting point, the ultimate point we're making. And Ian, you almost said it earlier, and I'm going to finish what I think you were about to say, which is that you can't have political union without fiscal union. In other words, there isn't a common taxation. There
cultural union.
Well, no, but even if we leave aside the culture and the language and all that sort of thing, when you've got these 27 countries, but they are still mainly autonomous, i.e. they raise their own tax and spend their own taxes, it's...
Do you know what scares me,
Let me just quickly finish. I think... we probably are at the point, and this harps back to the political stuff we were talking about earlier, where Europe's got shit or get off the pot. It's either got to be United States of Europe or go in the direction Ian was just saying of dissolution.
Well, the thing that scares me, which I was hoping we were going to talk about, but we're probably going to get time, is given Europe's situation and given certain comments made by Börje Ekholm of Ericsson in the last few months, given the current US administration and its determination to have homegrown solutions for everything, and the fact that it doesn't have homegrown solutions for radio access network vendors, given Nokia's plight with mobile networks and the fact that you could argue that it's subscale and maybe more investment goes in there, given speculation about the US coming and buying one or two European vendors, given, I think Ekholm himself said, if this carries on, we're going to relocate and we're going to have our headquarters in America.
Well, that's another thing with the tariffs.
Why wouldn't they? If I were him, I'd say the same thing.
He's a US citizen.
They make more money. He's a US citizen. They make make more money there than they do anywhere else in the world. They've got a factory, by the way. Their tariff situation, to get back onto tariffs, is not a problem for them because all the equipment they sell in America is made at a factory in Dallas.
And let me just quickly recap for our audience why that's relevant, because a big part of what Trump's been saying is if you invest in the US, we won't tariff you. Yeah. If you don't, we will. Yeah. And so what he's trying to do is push more and more inward investment, and Ericsson's already quite well set up in the US.
And Nokia was asked about this, I think, at the press conference we were at by journalists you'd expect to ask those questions. I think Tommy Wheater making the point that we actually invest a huge amount in America and we have more R&D. But, well, it's a good point because they have Bell Labs, obviously. Yeah. They're part American company.
Which they got from Alcatel-Lucent.
But you could see somebody so I've heard talk at MWC, it's in my Nokia Tommy Wheater article, prospective buyers of Nokia's mobile networks business, Lockheed Martin, Starlink.
Wow.
Potentially. I'm not saying...
Yeah, that's speculation.
But this is really scary, I think, for Europe. If you get an America that decides we need to have... Open RAN's failed, yeah? Open RAN's failed in terms of let's try to bring through a Mavenir or a parallel wireless or whatever. We have no equipment making ability ourselves. Mm-hmm. What's the solution? Let's buy an Ericsson, let's buy a Nokia. And then Europe loses two of the tech champions it's got. Yeah. Europe's going to go, I'm going to do this again, Scott, you have to explain.
Now Ian's pointing downwards, everyone.
But Ian, there's one thing here. I think in these days, it's so hilarious to see this. And I saw, now we need to buy weapons in Europe instead of buying it in the US and doing all those things, okay? No one talks about our dependency of China. Okay, the reality is
about China.
No, listen. Don't worry. That's our final segment.
Germany is Germany is a country of Chinese cocaine. Okay, that's a reality.
Literally. Didn't know there was such a thing.
I've never tried Chinese cocaine.
I associate them more with opium.
I've never actually tried cocaine at all.
You're saying that Germany's addicted to Chinese imports. Is that a metaphor? You weren't talking about
58% of the 5G infrastructure is from China. All the communication solutions. Exactly. All the communication solutions which German railroads are using to make the rails run is from Huawei. And the cloud which Deutsche Telekom is selling to public customers and private customers in Germany is from Huawei. Yeah. Listen, if you're German, you don't need to apply for a visa to China. They have all your information.
I've already got it. Okay, well, maybe that's a good segue to our final segment. And after that, we'll wrap up, partly because we're running out of time, partly because I've drunk about 400 beers and I need to get a bog. Is a thing I wrote this morning, and I know you're aware of it, John, which is, my headline is EU Parliament offices raided by police on suspicion of bribery by Huawei.
Oh, my God.
And this is an interesting bit of... I think it was broken by maybe a Belgian site. Well, there's a site called Follow the Money.
Follow the Money. They are from the Netherlands.
Okay, they're Dutch.
And they start working this story in October last year.
Yeah, so John, you've been aware of it for a little while. I'm going to try and get you to tell us stuff that isn't in the public domain because you've had a couple of beers.
Yeah.
But let's see how it goes. So basically...
Give me another beer. You get the.
Why did that make you laugh here? Yeah. Pierre just started pissing himself.
Sorry.
Do you want another beer, Pierre?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. He doesn't even have one.
He has. He's had one of those wingmen.
How many have you had, you, Ronnie?
Yeah. Okay. So, cut a long story short, Belgian police raided a bunch of premises, some of which were related to the European Parliament, and some of which were related to claimed Huawei lobbyists. Now, I'm sure everyone knows the term, but I think it's useful to define the term lobbyist. Lobbyist is basically people whose professional endeavour is to influence policymakers, typically politicians and secondarily maybe regulators and that sort of thing. And lobbying is legal. I actually don't think it should be. I'm a bit of a purist when it comes to interfering in the legislative and democratic process. I don't like lobbying. I don't like campaign contributions. I don't like any time where private money is directly linked to the public sector because it's just corruption. It's just, in this case, it's legal corruption. Anyway, that's just me. And anyway, they found the evidence that these Huawei lobbyists have been greasing the palms of these European parliamentarians or people affiliated to them. Now, and it's a big scandal that the BBC was covering it. Politico's talking about it. Everyone's talking about it. It's quite a big deal, and it's obviously especially incendiary because it involves Huawei and overlaps with some of the stuff we've touched on before, and we certainly touched on previous pods with you, John, which is the geopolitical tension between the West, in inverted commas, and the Chinese sphere of influence, and typically personified by Huawei. And as you know, John, I know you don't entirely agree with me. While I think there may well be reasons of suspicion, and I take your point that you've made in the past, which is that if we are suspicious of China, then why the fuck would we let their companies be involved in our critical infrastructure? I completely concede that point. What I don't like is the tinge of sort of knee-jerk xenophobia that just assumes that anything that comes out of China must be much more shifty than everywhere else. But anyway, maybe that's another one for the pub. However, and the reason I frame it that way is because it's interesting how this has been framed. On one level, this corruption seems quite trivial, and perhaps it's a bit close to the bone for us journalists, because some of it involves just being taken out for dinner or being taken to football games. And, you know, we've had a long-running thing, I'm sure you're aware, John, where I talk at the
You were at a football game long time ago.
I was at a rugby game with VMO2.
Yeah.
You were at a footbol game with 3, was it?
I don't do things like that.
Yeah, there we go. All of a sudden, Ian doesn't do that shit. And yeah, but the point is, you know, I've had this occasional segment at the start of the pod where I talk about Bribe of the Week, and I call it Bribe of the Week partly because it makes me laugh to do it, but also because I'm just sort of nodding to transparency. But you know, like you bought us these beers, we could call them bribes.
It's the degree to which you do it.
Exactly.
To bring some beers.
You know, if you go out with,
I suggested it might be a good idea.
I mean, I think the interesting thing about this, like, take Huawei out of it, but how ethical should journalists be about going out with companies?
And this isn't about journalists' a story, but yeah, I'll take your tangent.
It's a telecom story, but and it's related to the Huawei thing.
No, go ahead. I'm just stressing that this story isn't about journalists.
No, it's not about journalists. Yeah. But all I'm saying is that, well, anybody actually, if you get taken out by a company, where do you draw the line?
Yeah, totally.
It's probably okay. I think you know, taking. You could say you shouldn't even go out to the pub and accept a beer from them,
Indeed.
which I think is getting to a ridiculous level. But if you're going to be completely purist, you could say that you
should not
even
accept
do that.
anything.
Yeah.
But then obviously on the other end of the scale, you're obviously talking about huge backhanders and massive amounts of money, which I think most people would say, well, that really is unacceptable.
So
there's a grey line,
I agree.
Blurry line.
Listen, if you have the job you have, I totally understand the way you look at it. And I would say I agree with you, okay? If you have the job where I have, where we are delivering information to telecom operators all over the world, our reality is very different. So we very often, when operators buy something from us, we just talk about sometimes just like a PDF file. We have to sign a contract, a document, which basically says a lot of compliance stuff, serious compliance stuff, including like, we're not allowed to give any gifts for any of the employees. We're not allowed to, and so on. The list of things we're not allowed to do is huge. Okay, and there's very rich. We talk about operators in Latin America. We talk about operators in Africa. We talk about the US and Europe, everywhere. It's the same compliance stuff. Okay, latest we had one. We got a document we did something in Bangladesh. Which is rated as one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Yeah. Basically, in the contract, I would say we couldn't invite them for a beer. They don't bring beers. That's another story. But anyhow, but really restricted. We also have clients who sometimes says, "Oh, you do this research. Which of your employees have been involved?" We want and they do background check on them. They hire a private investigator to do background check on them.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's a reality. When it comes from that's one part. Then you have the lobby part. We don't do lobby work. We deliver a lot of information to operators, and they use it, and their lobbyist is using it. But if you look at a country like USA, there is and also actually inside EU, there's a lot of transparency regarding lobbyists. They have to registrate who their meetings with and doing stuff like that. In the US, it's basically if you don't register, you have to be classified as a lobbyist, and you have to file who did you have meetings with and doing everything. Another kind of transparency you have in the US is like if some of my people in the US have a meeting with, let's say, FCC, they have, I think it's 48 hours to basically all the materials they showed and discussed in the meeting, they have to upload on the website at FCC. We had meetings with these people. We talked about these things. We use this material. And we also have to explain which kind of forthcoming regulations could this have impact on. Okay?
Yeah.
So in that way, we sometimes have journalists in the US reaching out to us and say, "Oh, we can see your employee so-and-so had a meeting with the FCC discussing these and these things, and we know this, and this is related to this forthcoming regulation. Could you please explain it?" Okay? That is a transparency which I really like. I have no problem with it. Okay? In my country, you cannot get access to the ministers' schedule to see who they have had meetings with, when and how. I was the last person in my country, Denmark, who had that opportunity.
Last person in Denmark?
The last person in Denmark. Ever. And the reason was that the minister, which was responsible for telecommunication, I got access to his calendar, all the meetings he had with the telecommunication industry over a period of 6 years. And he had 7 meetings in 6 years with people from the telecommunication industry. And I gave that story to the leading journalist and the leading conservative newspaper in that region of Denmark where he was elected, and was the whole front page saying that his calendar is totally empty. Okay? And since that, then that government at that time changed the law, so now you couldn't get access to it.
So you fucked it up for everyone?
I fucked it up for everyone. I'm sorry
nice
to
one,
say.
John.
Yeah. But the reality is...
That's what he does.
Listen, I like transparency, okay? When we go back to the Huawei case, okay? this is like, I'm sure that I've seen some statements actually today, and I don't recall what it was. Huawei said, "Oh, this is minor things, and this is it."
Yeah, well, I got
it's
that,
individuals.
I've got that
individuals. It's a single individual, and we have a zero tolerance policy, and going on, all those things. So they say all the right things. Okay, I just want to say is there was a case which had not been covered in European media in Indonesia, where we talked about millions of dollars in a sofa. Okay,
Yeah.
We talk about. I got the transcript from the court where basically a guy was asked at the court, so did you get any gifts? Yes, I got a bag. Okay, what kind of bag? Louis Vuitton bag. Okay, who gave it to you? Huawei. Okay. Did you get other gifts?
A bunch of cash.
What did you get other gifts? Oh, I got a Hermes belt. Okay.
I don't think they're...
it's like...
They're bribery stuff.
Yeah.
Is, by the way, separate
and
from
honestly,
the government stuff.
And you could say...
Potentially.
And it... Listen, bribery exists all over the world. Okay.
Well, yeah, Ericsson
and
was doing it.
And actually, I think the day
don't say that. You're going to.
The day.
No, I'm just winding up.
They knew they were doing it. They admitted to it.
No,
now, by the way, sorry to butt in. Now, Ericsson couldn't even buy you a beer without having to fill in about 10
Ericsson
forms.
was the biggest briber in the world.
Oh,
they had this case in Iran.
Iraq.
Seriously,
you're going to get emails, Ian.
Yeah. I'm not going to get emails because it was all covered. They even had
I know. They got done for greasing palms in the Middle East and all.
Yeah,
but they got fined like $1 billion by the US authorities.
So I don't think that makes them the biggest bribers in the world.
The reality here is
it was pretty endemic in the system.
What we're talking about here is we have lobbyists, which basically. It's totally fair. Lobbyists go out and talk to politicians and try to convince him to do certain things. Okay.
Yeah.
But
I'm not.
If he combined the trying to convince him with arguments, whatever it is, and combine that with a greasy handshake, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's bad. Okay, it's really bad because
I agree.
Then it's like I don't want to pursue you to my arguments, the facts I have.
No.
I know my facts is so weak that I have to pay you.
I think I agree. Bribery's bad. I actually think this could work out really badly for Huawei in Europe, given the fact that its equipment's still heavily in use, more than the sort of technical stuff that's been going on. But everybody does it, don't they?
So I think the point,
everybody bribes.
I don't think
these organisations bribe.
Give me a go, mate.
Yeah.
I think John touched on it well. There's two increments. There's the increment of the bribe.
Yeah.
So there's and I said in my story, we were taken out for dinner.
No, I'm talking about proper bribes.
Exactly.
Let me just you get a phone.
These two, man, they're not giving me a chance now.
Sorry,
you never talk.
Oh, shut up! You've just had a big go. It's my fucking turn. So there's the increment of the bribe. So Ian and I, for example, went for dinner on the Wednesday night before we went out on the Lash with Huawei, and that's fine. We hung out at Ben and Hazel. It's all groovy. But as I said in my piece, there's no even suggestion there's anything transactional about it.
Yeah.
It's just a night out that we happen to not be paying for.
Yeah.
And then it
was a dinner.
Not even a night out, just a dinner. And then you can go one level further up than that we've been transparent about. You've gone to football games. I went to a rugby game. That's fine. And
I've never been to a football game with Huawei though. But I have been with
a company. I'm talking about. Yeah. I'm not talking about the company here. I'm talking about the increments of sort of exchange of goods and services, whatever, however you want to describe it. And it's a grey area, as you touched on earlier, Ian, where the cut-off is there. But I think we can all agree one cut-off will be a brown envelope under the table.
Yeah, but
another cut-off will be a Louis Vuitton bag. Anyway, let me just quickly finish. And then the other thing is what profession you're in, which John touched on. We, as journalists, everything we do is in the public domain, so people can judge whether or not we're unduly influenced by those being taken out for dinner or taken to football games.
Totally different.
Whereas politicians in the background. Anyway, I'll shut up. Those are the 2 points I wanted to make.
But that wasn't the point I was making. The point I was making was that the stuff that Huawei's been accused of doing, like in the stories this week, today, other companies do as well. It's not unique. It will obviously reflect very badly on them and in their position in Europe because there was already a campaign against them anyway. So people will say, "Oh, look at this! They're also bribing Europeans to European politicians to stay." But Ericsson, I mean, I'm not saying this, by the way, in a way
exonerate them. But you're saying they're not allowed.
I'm not saying that you were saying, "Oh, you're going to get in trouble with Ericsson."
No.
Ericsson admitted to this. It was not current regime.
So
Ericsson was doing bribery on a global scale.
in Iraq.
It wasn't just in Iraq. It was widespread. It was all over Africa. It wasn't just in Iraq. It was... John, read the news reports from a few years ago. Ericsson's system of bribery dating from sort of 2000 right through till the last years of the Vestberg administration was widespread across all countries in Africa, in the Far East. It was endemic. It was bad.
Listen, let's make it very simple. My view on bribery is just like pregnancy. You can't be half pregnant, okay?
Okay, you can't be half bribed.
You can't be half right. Either you're corrupt or you're not corrupt. Okay.
I don't know if I agree. I think there are grey areas.
And there can be. Listen, I don't talk about you get a dinner which costs like €30 or €40.
Okay, well,
doesn't matter.
But then if you're being absolutist,
forget that.
That's
there is transparency in what you're doing. What I'm talking about is politicians, which gets gifts.
Yeah.
That's what Ericsson was doing. They're not talking about bribing journalists.
No, but I'm talking about we have a case where in a numbers of countries there's 15 members of the European Parliament, which, according to what we've seen in the media right now, is basically have been bribed getting physical gifts or cash, whatever it is, which are sitting in the European Parliament, okay? And basically, my personal opinion is that we need to pay politicians a decent salary, okay? Fine. But politicians have a responsibility which is very high, okay?
Yeah.
And listen, forget Huawei 2 seconds. What sucks here is those politicians which accept it, okay?
Yes, and they should be punished.
They should be punished big time, okay? And the worst part here, if someone get punished here, will probably be a guy on a low level in Huawei.
So you're worried about the cover-up.
Yeah. That's what happens when the banks get into trouble, isn't it? Yeah. It's always like the little body does the Excel models who ends up getting, going to jail for 20 years.
That's a reality. Yeah. And listen, corruption exists. It's much better. It's much less today than was like 20 years ago, where people have these kind of greasy handshakes across the world. Okay, that's a reality. In Denmark, you could deduct bribery until like 7 or 8 years ago. Okay.
What, it's tax deductible?
Tax deductible.
You put it on your spreadsheet as bribe.
Exactly.
That's the way forward, John.
Listen, and I tell you, and I have a friend who, more than 15 years ago, worked in a big Danish company where he was basically known as the cleaner, the guy who fixed things across the world. Okay.
I thought there were guys who shot people cleaning.
Yeah,
right. Or like
so it is exists. But listen, we just want to say we were there. We are moving in a different direction, and what the case we have seen here now is a case which belongs to the past. How it was in the past. It shouldn't be. We shouldn't have a case like that taking place in 2024 or 2025. Okay. We should have moved on. Okay.
That's a great point to wrap it up on, and I'm going to wrap it up not least because we're running out of time, and my bladder's running out of time. I'm going to read my final paragraph from my bit, which is my feelings on the matter. I'll just read it out. This is my own words. So let's see what this investigation turns up. If it's just a few pricey meals and invitations to a corporate box at sports events, then it's hard to see how this differs from the ambient political corruption that's universally tolerated. I stress I don't necessarily agree that that's good. If money or valuable gifts were offered by Huawei lobbyists and accepted by European parliamentarians, however, this would be a more straightforward case of corruption. We look forward to seeing the evidence uncovered by these raids. So, yeah, I think that's it, and I think we can all agree on that, and I think that's a good point to wrap it up if that's all right with everyone.
Listen, let me say it very simple. Mobile World Congress?
He's peeing himself.
Mobile World Congress was cool.
I thought that was it.
No, that's okay.
Go on, I'll let John wrap up while Ian flees to the toilet.
No, it's okay.
No,
are you?
Listen, John, don't talk to me.
Yeah, we don't disagree.
He's going to the toilet. Do your wrap up, and then I'll say my proper goodbye. You were going to wrap up about.
Yes, I can do that. Should we do that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
He's still recording, aren't you?
Yeah.
No, I think the Mobile World Congress was a great event in many ways. Met a lot of cool people. I had a fun evening with you guys.
Very much.
I think it's a little bit sad that the industry is still sitting there in the corner, feeling sorry by themselves. I think it's a little bit sad that the heroes after Mobile World Congress is not so much the operators, but those who deliver the services on top. Yep. One of the things I'm really missing down there, and I miss that every year, that is when we talk about all this technology, which we all love, how do we turn this into cash?
Yeah.
I never hear that. I never hear about the business models. The second thing I never hear about is...
how long is this list going to be, mate?
How does this turn into revenue for the operators so they can make better return to their shareholders? We don't see that. We don't hear that.
And it's the same thing every year.
Same thing every year. And there, the industry basically is so old-fashioned, yeah?
Okay. We'll wrap it up there, man. Thanks a lot. Will you join us for a few more after?
Yes, of course.
Good stuff. Okay, so that was all good fun. Ian had to leg it with like 2 minutes to go. And yeah, I'll just wrap up there. Hope you enjoyed it and make sure you join us for the next one.